Jack was a young man in his early 20s with bright blue eyes and a warm smile that could light up a room. He lived in a quaint little town surrounded by rolling hills and lush forests, a place where everyone knew each other and looked out for one another. Jack was no exception, as he was known throughout the town as a kind and generous person, always willing to lend a helping hand to anyone in need. Despite his many virtues, Jack lived a simple life, content with his modest lifestyle. He worked as a sales associate at the local hardware store, where he spent most of his days assisting customers with their purchases and organizing the shelves. He was always eager to learn, and he loved to talk about tools and hardware with the customers who came into the store. In his free time, Jack enjoyed fishing in the nearby lake. He loved nothing more than the peace and quiet of the lake, surrounded by the beauty of nature. He would often spend hours fishing, catching trout and bass, and then grilling them for dinner with his friends and family. He had a deep appreciation for the simple things in life, and he never took for granted the beauty of the world around him. Despite his busy schedule, Jack always made time for his friends and family. He had a close-knit group of friends who he had known since childhood, and he was always there for them whenever they needed him. He also had a strong relationship with his parents, who he visited every week for dinner. Jack was a beloved member of the community, and everyone who knew him loved him for his infectious laugh and kind heart. One summer day, Jack decided to take a break from his routine and go on a fishing trip to a remote part of the lake. He packed his gear and set off early in the morning, eager to spend the day surrounded by nature. The sun was shining and the birds were singing, and Jack couldn't help but feel grateful for this opportunity to escape the hustle and bustle of the town. As he made his way to the lake, Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. He had heard rumors of a particularly large bass that lived in this part of the lake, and he was determined to catch it. He set up his gear, baited his hook, and cast his line into the water. As he waited for a bite, he let his mind wander, taking in the sights and sounds of the surrounding wilderness. Suddenly, Jack heard a strange sound coming from the lake. He turned to see what it was and was shocked to see a tiny baby, no more than a few months old, flailing about in the water. The baby was too young to swim, and it was obvious that he was in distress. Jack's heart sank as he realized that the baby was drowning and in grave danger. He knew that he had to act fast if he wanted to save the baby's life. Without hesitation, Jack jumped into the lake and swam over to the baby as quickly as he could. He scooped the baby up into his arms and brought him back to the shore. The baby was soaked and shivering, but he was alive. Jack quickly wrapped the baby in his shirt and held him close, trying to keep him warm. He couldn't believe what had just happened, and he was filled with a mix of shock and gratitude that he was able to save the baby's life. As Jack sat on the shore, holding the baby in his arms, he couldn't help but wonder how the baby had ended up in the lake. He looked around for any signs of the baby's parents, but he was all alone. He knew that he needed to find help and get the baby to safety, but he wasn't sure what his next step should be. He sat there for a moment, holding the baby and trying to think of what to do next. As Jack sat on the shore, he could feel the weight of responsibility settling onto his shoulders. He knew that he needed to get the baby to a hospital as soon as possible, but he also knew that he needed to find out who the baby belonged to. He couldn't just leave the baby with strangers without knowing his background and medical history. With the baby still cradled in his arms, Jack made his way back to his car. He placed the baby in the back seat and covered him with a blanket to keep him warm. He then drove as quickly as he could back to town, his mind racing with thoughts of what he should do next. When Jack arrived in town, he went straight to the hospital and handed the baby over to the staff. They took the baby into their care, and Jack watched as the baby was whisked away to be examined. He was filled with relief that the baby was finally in the hands of professionals, but he was also filled with a sense of uncertainty about what was going to happen next. As Jack left the hospital, he knew that he had to find out who the baby belonged to. He needed to find the baby's parents and make sure that the baby was reunited with his family. He spent the next few days talking to everyone in town, trying to piece together what had happened. He talked to the police, the hospital staff, and even the people at the hardware store where he worked, but no one had any information about the baby or his parents. Despite his efforts, Jack was unable to find any information about the baby's family. He was starting to feel frustrated and hopeless, but he refused to give up. He was determined to find out who the baby belonged to, and he was willing to do whatever it took to get answers. Days turned into weeks, and still, Jack had no leads on the baby's family. He had exhausted all of his resources, and it seemed as though he was no closer to finding out who the baby belonged to. Jack was faced with a difficult decision. He couldn't just abandon the baby at the hospital, and he didn't want to give him up for adoption without knowing who his family was. With a heavy heart, Jack realized that he was going to have to take care of the baby himself. He was scared and unsure, but he was also filled with a sense of purpose. He was going to be the baby's guardian and make sure that he was loved and taken care of, no matter what. So Jack took the baby home with him and settled into his new role as a single parent. He was determined to give the baby the best life possible, despite the challenges he was facing. He worked hard to provide for the baby and make sure that he had everything he needed. He was a bit of a mess at first, but he was a quick learner and soon found that he was capable of more than he ever thought possible. As Jack grew more comfortable in his role as a single parent, he continued to search for the baby's family. He spent hours scouring the internet and contacting local authorities, but to no avail. The baby, who he had come to love as his own, remained a mystery. One day, Jack decided to take a walk down to the lake where he had found the baby. It was a beautiful day, and he wanted to clear his mind and enjoy the peace and quiet. As he approached the lake, he noticed a group of people frantically searching the shoreline. Jack approached them and asked if he could help. "We're looking for a baby," one of the women explained tearfully. "He went missing from the campground nearby." Jack's heart sank. Could it be the same baby that he had taken home with him? He didn't want to get his hopes up, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was the answer he had been searching for. He offered to help with the search, and the group gratefully accepted. As they searched the area, Jack noticed a familiar blanket lying near the water's edge. He ran over and picked it up, his heart pounding in his chest. It was the same blanket that he had wrapped the baby in all those months ago. Jack's mind raced as he wondered if this could finally be the break he had been waiting for. He handed the blanket to the woman who had been speaking to him and watched as her eyes filled with tears. "This is it," she cried. "This is the blanket our baby was wrapped in." At that moment, Jack knew that the search was finally over. He had found the baby's family, and they were overjoyed to be reunited with their missing child. But even as he watched the family embrace, Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness. He had grown to love the baby as his own, and now he was faced with the prospect of letting him go. As the baby's parents thanked Jack for his help, he hesitantly told them about the journey he had been on with the baby. He explained how he had found him in the lake and how he had taken care of him for the past several months. The parents were shocked and filled with gratitude for the love and care Jack had given their son. After talking with the parents, Jack realized that they were kind and understanding people who were just grateful to have their baby back. They were happy to hear that he had been well taken care of and that he was loved. They thanked Jack again and told him that they would like him to visit the baby whenever he missed him. Over the next few weeks, Jack spent time with the baby and his family, building a relationship with them. He was happy to see the baby thriving and growing, surrounded by the love of his family. But he also found himself missing the little boy who had become such a big part of his life. Despite the sadness he felt at having to say goodbye, Jack knew that he had made the right choice in helping to reunite the baby with his family. He was proud of what he had accomplished and was grateful for the experience. He would always remember the little boy who changed his life forever.